This is Jeremy Toeman, and today on Founder at 50, my guest is Dave Feldman, a seasoned product leader and UX strategist who's built and led teams at Yahoo, AOL, Google, Facebook, and multiple startups. In our episode, Dave and I chat about what it was like to be a pajama-clad solo contractor long before we all learned to say, "You're muted." We also unpack what it really means to build great products, not just features, but experiences rooted in empathy, craft, and intentional design. Dave offers hard-earned insight on the hidden emotional tolls of being an entrepreneur and how product debt, just like tech debt, will catch up to you when ignored. Dave and I also share a deep love for productivity hacks and tools, and often end up deep in the weeds on the best way to manage emails, to-dos, meetings, and all the other workplace essentials. Whether you're designing your first MVP or navigating startup burnout, Dave's story is packed with lessons in resilience, self-awareness, and building with heart. You'll walk away with practical wisdom and probably a new appreciation for messy sketches, imperfect prototypes, and difficult conversations. Let's jump in. Dave, great to see you. How you doing today?
I am doing well. It is late in my day and early in yours.
Yeah, I was going to say good morning slash afternoon. You're in Berlin now, right?
That's correct. Moved here a year and a half ago.
Now, we first met God knows how many decades ago back in the Bay Area. What brought you to Berlin at this stage of your journey? I like to start a little bit at the end and then we go rushing back to the beginning.
The true and trite answer is adventure. The expansion of that is my wife and I have been interested in moving abroad since we met, which is now, scarily enough, 23 years ago. And literally, we've been talking about it most of that time. And I think anytime we hit an inflection point, I get a new job, I leave a job, she gets in, we're like, maybe now's the time. And then we're like, nah. And at some point around 2021, we were just like, you know what, if we're going to do this, we just got to do it. Don't worry if it's a good time or not. Let's just do it. And so I shut down my startup at the end of 2022. I started looking for jobs, and I started looking for jobs here in Europe, and Berlin was pretty high up the list, and that's what worked out. And it's been fantastic.
Amazing. All right, now we're going to figure out how you got to Berlin. So, do us a quick favor, Dave. Where'd you go to school, and what were you doing in your early 20s? Get us up to about 25, if you will.
Okay, so school, I presume you mean start with college,
I
though I
mean,
will
if you've
mention
got an amazing grade school story, I'm
I,
down.
I probably have interesting grade school stories, but I'll leave it at I grew up in upstate New York, about 4 hours drive northwest of New York City. I went to college at Harvard in the Boston area. I thought I was going to be a marine biologist because I think whales are cool. And at the time I was, 17 and that was enough. But then I took biology and it didn't really sit with me. And I took computer science and I had taken computer science in high school and I had also been programming since I was like 11. And I just I don't think it had occurred to me that you could follow that as a path. And it was a good time, as it turns out, to follow that as a path because when I got to college, Mosaic, the web browser, had just started happening. And by the time I graduated, we were like deep in the .com boom. And so like I lucked out in terms of like following a passion and it being a good time to follow that passion.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's funny. It never seems amazing when it was your life. You're just like, oh, that happened. But yeah,
So, first of all, does Harvard have a marine biology major? Are there a lot of
no.
Harvard trained marine biologists? Because that
Okay.
that would blow my mind in a whole different way.
Well, of course, I didn't follow that path. So I know that you can take biology courses. It would stand to reason that there are Harvard trained marine biologists, but we have very quickly reached the end of my knowledge on that front.
Very good. All right. One of the things I've been trying to go down memory lane with people occasionally, I'm going to put you on the spot for this. Can you trace for us mosaic, a word you use that some of our listeners will know and some will not, to what the current mosaic is?
As in, what is the current equivalent of Mosaic?
Yeah, or what it evolved to, etc.
Yeah, I mean, how much detail do you want?
Let's just do the highlight reel. I know that. I mean, I'll kick it off with the top of the pyramid here is the mosaic is the roots of Netscape Navigator.
Yeah, yeah. So it was the original web browser back when the web was a thing that you saw at universities, and I think it was military, and my history on that is a little bit fuzzy, but when I got to college, there was this thing you could install on your computer, and then all of a sudden you had these web pages, and like some courses had web pages, and some other people had web pages. That within the course of my freshman year kind of evolved into Netscape, and Netscape begat ultimately Firefox and also led to Internet Explorer and Safari and Chrome. And if I had to pick an equivalent today, it would be Chrome.
It's probably Chrome. Although I think people now are already probably going over to Arc.
Although Arc has now been shut down in favor of some sort of chatbot thingy that that company is building.
I don't know. I think it's a fascinating time for people like you and me where the internet really means the web,
Hmm.
right? Like when we think about apps, they all sit on the internet. We know that, but I think when we think about being on the internet per se, it's having
Yeah.
a web page or an interactive web experience. And I think we're at that first time since Mosaic where we're starting to look at how we use all this with almost like a post web way of thinking with chatbots and etc. What do you think of that?
I think that's fair. How much of that sticks? How much of like any rabbit hole you go down starting with a chatbot still ends up in a web page? I don't know. Right? Like on
Yeah,
the one hand, I can ask ChatGPT for an answer to things and it'll give me an answer and I can read that answer. And on the other hand, parts of that answer are made up. And so I kind of want to follow the citations and then I'm back on a web page. So that's a yes and it's not like a rejection. Like I do think
fair.
how we interact with the internet is changing.
Yeah, fair. I asked my 18-year-old daughter, and her comment was she prefers going to websites versus using apps and other things. I think
Mm.
she's a bit of an anachronism in a way. Anyhow, so you've landed at school. The web is starting to happen, or the
Mhm.
consumer web, or whatever we want to call it, the information superhighway. What happens when you graduate? Did you go take a job? What did you do first?
Yeah, so over the course of my kind of college career, I got really interested not just in computer science, but in human computer interaction, which is kind of the parent field of UX, which we called it product design. Now they seem to be calling it UI UX. It'll change again next year. And so I took a couple of courses along those lines. I cross-registered at MIT for a technological tools for learning course, and I took a graphics course, and I took some psychology courses. And when I graduated, I did two stints at different academic labs at Cornell
Oh,
and then at the University of Maryland as a like research assistant in these HCI labs, in these human computer interaction labs, effectively learning more UX in an academic setting. From there, I did a couple of short stints at different companies in like a product manager or designer capacity, and then kind of fell into contract work just because
okay.
like I was looking for a job and the thing that landed on my lap was contract work. And I then spent, I think, the next 6 years in the Boston area as I think at the time I called myself an interface designer, but that's not a term we use anymore. But in hindsight, I would call it kind of product UX consultant, right?
Sure.
Bring me in. You're going to say, hey, here's some wireframes for the thing we're about to build, or we already built it. Make it usable before you launch it. And then I have to say, okay, but let's talk about your use cases. Let's talk about your users. Let's take these wireframes and deconstruct the use cases behind them. Oh, you've already written the code and you want to launch it in 2 weeks. Okay, let's see what we can do if I dive into your JSP and maybe we'll figure it out. Which is very rewarding. And that does bring us to and past the age 25. So I'll stop.
So you're in your 20s, you're helping companies build products, which I had actually a similar track. I want to talk a bit about that product design work. When you look at building products today, which you've now built many, and you look at it back then, one of the things I talk about is how we didn't really have A/B testing, right? A/B testing was
Yeah.
because we also didn't really have metrics and data. We had like page views. What I'd argue is some of I don't know if I want to call it the art or the soul of product design, I feel has changed dramatically because now we can test everything to the nth degree. I'm curious, as someone who spent most of their career building product stuff, how do you feel about those changes and do you embrace them? Do you like the old way? Do you like the new way? What is your approach to using data, using metrics combined with kind of a gut feel and training for understanding humans and how they interact with computers?
I have two almost conflicting answers, but I think they're both true. One is that we talk about using data like we use it a lot more and a lot better than we actually do, at least industry wide. Like for all of the data that's out there and even all of the data we collect, I see less truly data informed decision making than one might like. I see less use of A/B testing than one might think. And everyone thinks everybody else is doing it better, but I'm not like, I'm sure it's happening. And there are plenty of companies that are really, truly in their data and doing a great job, but there are a lot that aren't. So that's almost like a caveat. All
Yeah.
of that said, I do think that some things have fallen by the wayside in terms of, let's call it product quality. Like I went so far a couple of years ago as to create a definition of product quality because it helped my then employer think about it from a perspective other than the data, which is great. But I think there are things that we have to take on faith, not because they're articles of faith, but because the effort required to do anything else is prohibitive, right? So like, does a really janky product that crashes all the time serve users as well as a really polished product that doesn't crash all the time? I would say yes. Do I need to prove that with data? Well, no, that's kind of hard to do, right? And so you either say, when we are done with the MVP, when we have proven product market fit, when the data is telling us we're in the right place, we're going to take a minute and turn a V0.9 into a V1, or you don't. And if instead you say, well, we'll do that polish work when you can draw a straight line to revenue, then it's not going to happen and your products are going to suck. And maybe you'll still have a successful business, but it's a lost opportunity. And I think I like to compare it to dialing down tech debt. You can go a long time without dialing down any tech debt. And at some point, your code base is going to fall over of its own weight. And I think the same
Right.
thing is going to happen to a product if you wait too long on the product quality.
Yeah, I love thinking about terms in the term of product debt, and we think about it all the time with Augie, for example. We don't onboard our users
Yeah.
nearly as well as I wish we did, and then whenever we're faced with that product decision, I'm sure you've done this many times. It's, well, we can fix that or address this other massive problem, or we see this opportunity
Yeah.
here, or, and I think you're right, and I love the thinking of how do you get it as close to right the first time from a overall feel of product.
Hmm.
Like I really like to land on, and I think we're saying similar things in very different language in a way where the product quality starts with the MVP, right? I like to think that I'd rather have two less features, but those features are so much better done so that you might be, what's the mile, we're a mile wide, inch, whatever the
Yeah.
opposite of a mile wide and inch thick is. I like to think of it somewhere, as opposed to the spray and pray of here's all the features,
Yeah.
can be pretty wonky.
Let's do a focused thing well rather than all the things, which even if you set aside product quality is usually a good idea. But I think another thing you're saying is let's take a little bit of time, not too much time, but let's take a little bit of time to have the craft along the way. I think that becomes an instinct.
So, what material advice, if you were to be talking to young Dave, the equivalent Dave right now, someone who's out there, and they are probably using Figma and A/B testing and all the tools that you and I didn't have at our age, what would be the thing you'd want them to maybe add to their process or way of thinking in their work?
And actually, that's very much not a hypothetical for me. When I've done consulting, when I've done mentoring of especially designers, but product people as well, I keep coming back to some core pieces of advice, which is get out of Figma, have conversations, get out of long PRDs, have short documents, but again, have conversations. By the time you've written down a set of product requirements, that ought to be the reflection of a conversation between product, engineering, design, maybe product marketing, rather than something the PM hands off and everyone else reacts to. That's both a better way to collaborate, it's more efficient, and it prevents putting people on the back foot about their own areas of expertise. And I think that there are tools other than Figma that are useful there, including paper sketches. Love paper sketches.
Love a
It's
sketch.
fast, it's an equalizer, anybody can do it. Docs with bullet points in them. Uh, Flowcharts, sometimes.
I'm
Waving
gonna
your
throw.
hands
I'm gonna throw.
around.
I want to throw a tool at you, Dave. Have you ever used balsamic wireframes?
Not in many years.
I still
Somebody,
use it. I still use it because of what you just said. I think it's got that paper sketch feel.
Mhm.
You have a tool that's in your arsenal that like is just an old Dave favorite.
So I've used a tool a little like Balsamic recently, and I'm not going to say don't use those tools, but they still allow you to fiddle around and spend much time getting things lined up sometimes. The
Okay.
tool, so the baseline tool is literally a pen and paper, but I like having things digital. So I use an app on my iPad called Concepts.
Okay.
I think you could probably get the same thing out of something like GoodNotes. And I use an Apple Pencil and I do sketches. And those sketches, because Concepts has opacity and some nice little tools, they're a little prettier than your average sketch when you want them to be. But like I can still crank through different variations very, very fast, and I don't get too attached to them. And that's one of the reasons why sketching is so great, is that you're not you're not diving in on like, oh, let's make sure this box is the right size and this label is the right font, because there's no sizes, there's no fonts. It's going to look a little bit like crap no matter what you do.
I like I have this whole thing about perfection is the enemy of creativity.
Mhm.
Like if you want to be building a great product, you can't start by trying to figure out what's perfect. You've got to let it be a little fuzzy. And it's part of why I actually like tools like Balsamic and
Yeah.
probably similar to what you're doing with
Yeah.
concept and sketching. It's that I'd rather give my engineering team and design team a imperfect version of an idea for them to let flourish. Because
Exactly.
if I try to say, okay, this is the perfect mug, right? My perfect mug. Well, then I'm going to prevent your creativity from saying, well, could it use a spout? I don't know if it wants a spout, but
It could use a spout.
it could use a spout. And I look at it as the additive power of extra brains, effectively, that you want to usher in.
Exactly. And you want to put those brains in a creative mode. And if you hand them a Figma mock and there's a pink button in the lower right corner, they're going to say, I don't know about the rounded corners on that button. And if you hand them a sketch with a sketch of a button in the corner, they're more likely to be like, what if we didn't have a button there? What if
Right.
it just did the thing?
What if there is no
Why do
spoon?
Exactly. What if there is no spoon or no spout?
All right, Dave. So I love geeking out with product. Listeners, if you don't like that last conversation, we're going to do it like 3 or 4 more times in the next little while, I'm sure. So you're in your mid 20s, you're consulting, you're working on cool products. Did you have at any point in that part of your journey a career path or plan? Did you have a vision? Did you have by the time I'm X, I will be Y, or anything like that?
I don't think I had a plan. I liked the idea of getting better at what I was doing and maybe making some more money at it. I also believed from the bottom of my heart in this consulting mode that I was really lucky that I could just work from home every day. I rarely had to see other people in person. I could be in my pajamas. I didn't have to deal with all of this nonsense with teams and stuff.
Is
And I
this
thought that was pretty cool.
2019 and 20?
This is 2004.
You predated the work from home
I did.
lifestyle.
I did. I think I was a little bit of an entrepreneurial mindset. I tried to found a startup around 2004, but it wasn't because I was like, I'm going to be a startup guy. It was like, hey, I have an idea. Maybe I could make a business. Other people do that. So, like, it wasn't total chaos. Like, I was on a path and I was content to keep getting better at that path.
Okay. And how were you getting better at the path? How did you approach that?
I think there was a bit of reading blogs and stuff. Like I remember reading a lot of stuff out of an organization called User Interface Engineering with Jared Spool. I think they're still around. It's been a little while, but they were one of the big names in that field. But I think it was a lot of learning on the job. Occasionally, I had people who served in small capacities as mentors, and that was good for me. But I think, we're about to get to the next stage, I'm sure. And one of the things that precipitated the next stage was realizing the things I could learn through the reading I was doing, the very few people around me, and the act of doing. I was hitting a wall. I didn't feel like I was learning and growing at the level I wanted to be.
And what did you do about that wall?
Well, I decided to get a real job, to get like a job working for a company.
JOB.
And a job, and I went to my girlfriend and I said, hey, if I just start sending out resumes, it's a good chance I'm going to end up with job offers in California because that's where this industry is. What do you say? And we had already started talking about moving abroad, and so that was, sure, let's try that. It's not moving abroad, but California and Boston are pretty different.
So what year is this? Sorry, this is mid 2000s.
This is 2006.
Okay. So you're coming to the Bay Area, if I'm not mistaken, because I was there also. This is about when I'm leaving Sling to go to when I start consulting, actually. But this is kind of the heyday. We might think of like the Web 2.0 movement was right around 6, the beginning of distributed APIs, RSS feeds, all that kind of stuff. Where did you land when you arrived?
So over the course of 2006, I did a bunch of different interviews. One of them was with Yahoo, and I flew out, I interviewed with the team that managed the Yahoo homepage.
Okay.
And at the end of it, they were like, we understand your skill set better and we like you, but we feel like there isn't a slot for someone with your particular set of skills on the team. But the design leader from Yahoo Messenger, which many of your listeners will not have heard of Yahoo Messenger, but at the time, it was the largest messaging service in the US. It was equivalent to something like Facebook Messenger today or even SMS.
Right. I would
This
say
is
bigger
before.
than Facebook Messenger today. It's probably closer to WeChat, WhatsApp level today.
Yeah. Well, and the
Yeah.
numbers are so much smaller because the internet was so
Right.
much smaller and we didn't have smartphones. But yeah, and so they brought me back for another round of interviews and the team loved me and I loved the team, everyone. And I went out and it was just fantastic. I was at Yahoo for 3 years. That design leader became my mentor, not only for those 3 years, but then for a number of years afterward.
Okay.
And as I had hoped, the pace of learning just went through the roof. Just like I was suddenly surrounded by these skilled UX people, visual designers with different knowledge and different perspectives who could like blow my mind about things that I thought I knew. It was amazing. I loved it.
What was that actual title? Do you remember?
Senior interaction designer.
And what was the first product you were working assigned to?
Yahoo Messenger for Windows Vista.
Yahoo Messenger for Windows. Oh,
Which sounds quaint now, but it was fun because it was it was a blank slate, new product
okay.
on top of a new platform that Microsoft had developed. Not just a new platform, but a new way of describing user experience, a
Right.
new set of tools for designing and building those user experiences, a new way of designers and engineers collaborating. And so we were kind of on the forefront of a thing. And it would be simplistic to say it fizzled. Like that stuff isn't really fully around anymore. Some of it is, some of it evolved into other things, but some of the thinking was fresh and still relevant.
Absolutely. Actually, it's funny. Vista was right around Vista. I had my laptop stolen. That was when it was time to try something new. That was when I shifted over to Macs, was right in that time frame.
Mm-hmm.
But before it, I'd done a ton of work on Vista products for Sling. So one thing I'd love to hear is you moved from this world where you said before, you could be in your pajamas, you could work from home, you could be whatever you wanted to be, work on the clients you chose to, etc. Welcome to work, Mr. Feldman. Not quite punch in here, etc., because we know that the tech industry doesn't work that way. Was that transition a major challenge, or was it smooth sailing, or anywhere in between?
Much closer to smooth sailing than to a major challenge. And I credit my team and my manager there with making it that, with sitting down with me when I wasn't necessarily being the best team player or whatever you want to call it and saying, here's a different way you could approach this stuff. I think in preparing to talk to you today, I listened to your other guests and there's been a certain amount of like, what are the threads like running through your career? And I think both the most important and the most fun thread running through my career has been the discovery of my human empathetic self, if that makes sense, right? I spent these 6 years as an independent contractor thinking it was great that I didn't have to interact with people. And I show up at Yahoo and I'm like, holy shit, I like people. I am so happy when I'm working with people. And that led to maybe I want to manage people. Oh yeah, I like managing people. Isn't that great? And like that has been a trajectory. And then it has circled back around to how I think about products in very human terms, in very collaborative terms. It's been a fun thread, and I'm grateful that like I suppose there's a version of me somewhere out in the multiverse that never discovered that. And that version of me is, I don't know, less happy, less has lived a less rich life.
Then again, that multiverse person could have gotten bit by a magic spider or something.
Sure. I mean, I would just say in about 60% of multiverse versions of oneself, they've been bit by a magic spider. It's just the way it works. Yeah.
It must be. So I like what you were saying there. Actually, I have a similar story of a gentleman who actually is now at Yahoo, who worked for me when I was at CBS, who, when we're interviewing, made a very clear comment that, for him, he wasn't really interested in the team. He just kind of wanted to come and do the job. And he ended up staying at the company far longer than I did because of working with the team. So I would definitely say if you've been a person in your early 20s and you've never really been a solopreneur or side hustler, hacker, whatever that is, if you've always been resistant to trying to work with a group, I will 100% agree with Dave. When people ask me my favorite parts of my journey, every one of them has some team element about it.
100%.
So did you deliberately go after managerial roles? Was that you made it sound like that was a conscious realization. Tell us a bit more about that.
It was definitely a conscious realization. I don't remember if there was like one thing that prompted it, but I do remember being on the phone, I think on the phone with my sister, who is a professor of organizational behavior and therefore knows things about management, and saying,
Oh,
"No, I'm thinking management might be good for me." And I don't know, because I thought of myself as someone who wasn't good with people, wasn't empathetic. And she said, "Well, first of all, you can learn empathy, you can learn emotional intelligence to the extent that you don't have it, and I think you'd be great at it." And that and a few other data points, and I went for it. And again, I had this mentor manager who was great for me at that point. I don't mean he wasn't great later, but like at that point especially. And he said, "Okay, you want to go into management? Great. Let me give you a program over a period of time that will guide you toward a management role." And when he left the company in, I want to say mid late '09, maybe mid late '08, might have been mid late '08. He said, "Okay, Dave, you take over from me leading the team." And leading a team where you already know the people is not a bad way to ease into management. And so I
that's
was
true.
lucky.
So during that time at Yahoo, I'm curious, or it can even be after, were there any lessons you learned the hard way? Were there any, I mean, everything's sort of sounding pretty good so far. I'm curious, any stumbles along the way that you'd care to share that we should chat through?
The thing that occurs to me, I can't think. I think I learned a lot at Yahoo. I don't want to make it sound like it wasn't learning. And I think there were moments, like there were tactical moments where I would do something, it wouldn't go well. I'd go to my manager and he'd be like, "What if you did it this way instead?" And that was valuable. But I think there were the beginnings of some bigger lessons that I didn't necessarily synthesize as bigger lessons until later, in terms of what it means to be diplomatic in a leadership context, in a non-leadership context, when to pick your battles and when not to pick your battles. I think those are hard things, especially for someone who feels a sense of responsibility to do it right.
Why don't you continue on that? So tell me more about what's the story you have in mind for that?
I think the story I have in mind, well, it's a bunch of different stories. I think one of the hardest things about working interpersonally with other people, which is how we always work with other people, is knowing not just the content of the conversation, but how to prosecute the conversation, how to say, this person is ready to hear what I have to say in this way, or I have to maybe come up with a way that they are ready to hear it, or I just need to listen to them for a while because I'm not understanding them. This thing that is so important to me that we do as an organization is not something the organization is ready to hear. And so no matter how important I think it is, I can't keep pushing on it. Those things are hard because you feel, like I said, you feel a sense of responsibility. And so I'm sure that at Yahoo, I pushed too hard on some things and probably should have settled down. And I did it again, and I did it again after Yahoo. And I will almost certainly screw that up again, but at least I'm starting to know what to look for on that front.
I know that feeling, by the way, and I'm sure many people are in that shoes where you were like, I'm going to the mat on this one. And, 5 minutes later, like, I don't really actually care about that thing that much. The moment, like, those
Yeah.
emotions and the who said what or whatever the thing was, the moment
Yeah.
you're past that and it comes, it's definitely something as I've aged, I've gotten 1,000% better at,
Yeah.
which either means I was terrible or I'm actually doing a decent job as I age.
Yeah.
Are
Well,
you?
and at its center, what you're describing is the very difficult skill of feeling emotionally wrought and having that little corner of your brain go, take a beat.
Yes. Yes. How do you how would you counsel someone, again, younger, up and coming, on how to notice that voice is there? Because we all have it. There's no question. I think when we start out in life, we know how to shut it up and get it out of our way so we can have our silly moments. How do we encourage people to nurture that?
I think first of all, that voice gets better with experience. Sometimes we don't have that voice when we're younger. I think that's a tough one. I think what you unfortunately have to recognize is that people are going to screw it up, and then you have the examples to help them with. But like, if you were 20 years younger than you are and you came to me, or at least earlier in your career, and you came to me and you were like, "Oh, I just got into a fight with this coworker, yada yada yada." How were you feeling while that was happening?
Mm,
What what was going on in your gut? What were the different parts of your brain telling you? Right? I think what I would do is start to try and coach the skills, almost like the real-time introspection skills to listen to the different voices in your head. And maybe also just encourage, like you'll notice a minute ago, I said take a beat. I didn't say don't continue, don't fight the fight, take a beat. It's never so urgent. It's rarely so urgent that you can't take a minute, that you can't even sleep on it and come back and say, I was thinking about what we said yesterday. And so giving yourself the time to process, the time to re strategize, just getting into the habit when you feel that you're in an emotional state of saying, I'm going to back down for a second.
yeah. Have you heard the Have you heard HALT? Have you heard the HALT acronym?
Uh-uh.
Someone gave me this once. There's a lot of great acronyms on the internet. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. And basically, any of those four sort of physio emotional states will likely have you react poorly, right? And
Yeah.
so the whole point of HALT is a self check. Am I hungry? Nah, I got a nice full stomach. Am I angry? Oh, yes, I am. That Slack message just, that.
Yeah.
So it's the one, it's one of those I try to use as much as I can. So let's keep going though on your journey now. I want to get us from Yahoo basically to Berlin. I believe we met actually while you were at Yahoo. My memory is that that was our first encounter because I met the Yahoo slash AOL teams, people like Temkin and Madi and that whole crew of folks, some of whom are still actually there, some of them gone to do amazing things. And that's where we met. Tell us now about how you went from Yahoo. And I know that a lot of the 2010s are you in and out of different startups and then obviously ending in Berlin. Let's get to that part.
Yeah. Let me give you the high level, like bang, 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 and then we can dig in wherever you see fit. So yeah, I left Yahoo around 2010, what I ended up doing was joining AOL, and that was following my manager from Yahoo, the one who had handed me the team when he left, and who was my mentor. This is Mati, who you just mentioned. And I was at AOL. AOL was a great experience. It was an interesting transitional time for AOL. I can talk about that, but as sometimes happens with interesting transitional times, it kind of fizzled in about a year and a half. I left AOL at the end of 2011 and said, I'm going to found a startup because that seems like a fun thing that people do,
Okay.
which is a dubious reason to found a startup. And so I spent 2012 looking around for startup ideas, teamed up with a co-founder at the end of 2012. And we built a messaging app with a machine learning system in it called Emu. We spent 2 years building that. We raised a seed round. We sold it to Google. I joined Google in late 2014, the same month I got married. And yeah, it was a big month. And I was first a PM on like a super secret machine learning project at Google that didn't ultimately see the light of day. And then I transferred back over to UX and led the design team for Gmail and for a product called Inbox by Gmail that doesn't exist anymore, but
I remember that.
it was a great product. And the thinking that went into it was formative for me in terms of how I approach product today. And I can talk about that more as well. I was recruited out of Google by Facebook to work on the Facebook chatbot platform as a design manager. That was not what I would call a good culture fit, and I was not there very long. In 2018, I joined a company called Heap, which is does product analytics, and was there as VP of design and interim VP of product for total 2.5 years. That was a really great experience. I'm still in touch with a lot of people from that. I left because I had another startup idea burning a hole in my brain. My co-founder and I built a product called Miter, which was supposed to help people run better business meetings. We raised a pre-seed round. We tried to raise a seed round. It turns out raising a future of work seed round in mid 2022 when you don't have product market fit is not a winning combination. And so we shut that down at the end of 2022. And as I said before, at that point, we decided we were going to do this move, and I started looking around for jobs and spent a lot of very early mornings in California interviewing for stuff in Europe. Short list was Barcelona, Berlin, and Amsterdam.
Good choice.
And yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about this is that simultaneously where we moved would change our lives in a unique way, and also there are lots of good options. But I got a job offer in Berlin, and we moved here, and that was in November of 2023, and we've been here ever since.
Amazing. I love that part of the journey. I think if you get to this sort of stage of your career, you've probably had one of those bad fits. I had one myself, and probably around the same time you did. You made a comment that I want to sort of double click on, the dubious reason to start a startup.
Mm.
Now, I actually come from the school of thought that there are 2+ reasons to start a startup. One is the OMG problem / opportunity / solution, shower moment, crystal ball, etc. Right. And the other is the obsession to build a startup of some meaning. And
Mm.
when I left Sling, I actually had a venture capitalist literally offer me capital to start anything I wanted. And again, I think why we have some kinship is I had no ideas at the time. So today I have a list of like 90 side ideas, right? At the time I mean, part of it, I was just so spent from that sprint we were on. When you think about wanting to do a startup, what is it that must be true for you?
I think I need to be in a headspace where I'm ready to deal with what it means to be founding a startup. And I think that comment about dubious reason was everyone said it was hard to be a founder. And I was like, I could do hard things. I've done hard things before. And the joke I like to tell is it's not hard like a math problem is hard. It's hard like a breakup is hard.
Mm,
It is an emotional roller coaster where you constantly feel like you're failing even when you're succeeding. And I just wasn't ready for it in 2012. I just didn't know. Like I didn't steel myself for it because I didn't know I needed to steel myself for it. And as a result, I think it was rough on me.
yeah.
And I came out of that in 2014 saying I am never founding a startup again.
Why'd you change your mind?
Well, I remembered that I had said that, and I said, I also remember what it was like. I think I'm ready. I think I can do it better this time. I think I am prepared. And I also think I know some specific steps I can take to be prepared,
Yeah.
like getting a coach for my co founder and me, like making sure that we have something to protect that relationship, like talking to my wife and saying, hey, this is going to be hard. Are you ready for this? And let's set some boundaries. And like saying, just like knowing, oh, okay, this feels awful right now. I know this feeling. Okay. I can't make it not feel awful, but I can at least acknowledge that it's part of the process.
I that's so well said, David. And I think a lot of people really don't realize some of what you said. And I think we go through that learning is doing a startup isn't a hard math problem, right? It's not Goodwill looking in as a janitor, right? It's Goodwill looking as a janitor, and also not only can he solve the math problem, but being a good people person, understanding
Yeah.
fundraising, understanding market, understanding so many things. How do you steel yourself emotionally from that? Or is that the prep work that is what sets you up for that?
I don't think you can do it as prep work because beforehand, you just know it's coming,
Yeah.
right? The most prep you can do is say, this is going to happen and I need to be ready for it. And I need to create structures that allow me to be ready for it. And then create those structures and then keep reminding yourself. And hopefully find a co-founder who can help you weather that.
Yeah. And I think that's essential, right? People talk about solopreneurship. I think it's fine for like a side hustle or a thing where you can direct an engineer to build a thing that's like maybe smallish. But I think the moment it starts getting bigger, not having that person gets so much more
Yeah,
challenging.
I think so. And the flip side is you do need to manage that relationship. Like I said, we got a coach because we knew we were going to need one, and we did. Like there were points where we were so pissed off at each other, and we worked through it, and we came out of it better friends. But that was very much not a given. That was something that we had to make sure we were set up to do. And you mentioned like people don't realize this, and I think I'm looking for my next, I don't know if it's a job or a startup or whatever, and one of the things I'm thinking about is how might I help create the world in which more founders are both aware of this going in, ideally the first time they become a founder, or equipped to handle it? Like, is there a way I can help with that?
Well, I'll be candid. A part of the reason I'm doing this podcast is exactly that. I feel very
Yeah.
similarly. I feel like I watch people make the same mistakes that people like you and I have made, and they're going to keep making them, but maybe a few less people can make a few less drastic ones or something like that along the way.
Yeah. And I think I'm heavily influenced by some of the moments that have just been like sort of aha facepalm moments. Like the first time I ever had a leadership coach, and I went to him and I said, "Hey, I just had this one on one, and this conversation happened, and it was a little fraught." And he said, "Well, did you think of asking the question this way?"
Mhm.
I was like, no, I didn't think. Of course, I would want to ask the question that way. Like, it wasn't like somebody had to convince me of some new mode of thinking. It was just like, yeah, of course that's better. Duh.
So, with all these learnings, one of the things I like to ask is if you could go back, and slip yourself a note 20 years ago, and it's not buy Bitcoin or who's going to win the World Series, and it's not going to create some crazy sliding doors moment like you never, whatever, but just maybe help you navigate the roads a little easier, right? It's like wearing more comfortable shoes along the way. Is there a bit of advice that you might have loved to be able to pass on to a younger self?
It's tough to encapsulate all of this in a bit of advice. Like, I would be tempted to pass my younger self a reading list and say, trust me, read this stuff.
I like that.
And
That's a
then
great one. What can you tell us two or three of the things that would be on that list? No question, definitively.
I think so. Although my fear is that my 28-year-old self might not be ready to hear that stuff, but who knows? I think I would probably start with a book called Difficult Conversations. Not Crucial Conversations. I'm not saying that's a bad book, but Difficult Conversations, which, by the way, was the first book of that ilk that I read, and therefore is probably, I was the closest to 28 when that had an impact on me.
Okay.
So I'd probably recommend that. Maybe there's a book called, I think it's Leadership on the Line, um, which, as with so many business books, I have not read the whole thing, but the first N chapters were really valuable to me for the thing we were talking about before, the almost like the framework and the language around how to fight your battles, how to pick your battles.
Yeah, I think that's right. And by the way, I think you don't need to defend. Let's be honest. Most business books, the first chapter is the book.
Yeah,
Every now and then, the first third, but the last two thirds are unquestionably just full of quotes and diagrams.
yeah. And then this isn't about interpersonal stuff, but it is about behavioral science, which is part of how I approach product design. I'd probably put Nudge in there.
Great choice. So that's a great list. We know a little bit about that. I'm curious though, with everything that you've gone through in this stage of your journey, how do you define success today?
I think that it is an evolving concept for me right now. I think the end of my journey is I'm so glad to have moved to Berlin, but I've had a couple of rough gigs for myself here. Like, it hasn't worked out in terms of like finding that company that I just gel with.
Yeah,
Um, and what does that mean for who I am and how I relate to this industry? I think the thing I know is, and this is certainly not what I would have said at 28, I guess I define success as I feel successful and useful working with a group of people with whom I feel energized to work.
I love that. I love that. First of all, it's very you, but it's very groundable and real, right? It's sort of reinforcing something we both touched on earlier is how much people like you and I care about the team and the people we work with.
Like, it's everything. Like, yeah, I've spent a lot of my career on productivity and collaboration, and I tend to be drawn to those tools. But like, I've also worked on other stuff, and some of my best moments have been working on things that weren't on like the straight line of things Dave's works on, and it's because I found a team that I gelled with.
I love that. Now we're just about out of time, but you've got me thinking about team stuff, and I just don't want to lose the thread. Do you have any rubric, any process, or just basic advice on how do you approach finding that perfect team fit? Is it when you see it moment, or are there aspects that you're deliberately looking for?
I think first I'll just acknowledge that it's a privilege to be able to do that, right? Like, if you need to pay the rent, then none of this matters. If you are lucky
Right.
enough to be able to be choosy about your job, then you can start to think about this. Increasingly, I think I'm not willing again to take the risk of accepting a job where any of the interactions with people that I'm going to work with in that job felt weird.
Mm,
It's nice if I can say, why did that feel weird? But if I can't
yeah.
say, it felt weird because X, and you know what? I don't need to worry about X, then it's just not worth it because it's an indicator of something.
I like that a lot. I tell people that the recruiter's interactions with you matter. If someone says they're going to give you a
Yeah.
job offer, people have asked me like, how long do I have to respond to it to an offer? I said, well, ask that question, and the answer is going to tell you if you want to work for the company or not.
Yeah. If you want to give me 24 hours, then you don't care enough about the culture fit to give me the time to figure it out. That's a bad sign.
That's right. That's right.
And then beyond that, I actually have a list of reverse interview questions that I consult from time to time. And since I'm looking at product leadership roles, it's potentially things like, what's your approach to roadmaps? What do what does success look like for me in this role? What are your values? Give me an example. Like, tell me about a time when somebody lived one of your values or when somebody didn't live one of your values, and what did you do? Like really digging in, and it's like I said, reverse interviewing. But what are the things you care about? And then what are the questions that will get to the point where you can figure out whether they care about those things too, and not just talk about them in positive terms.
Dave, I can't think of a better way to end this episode. That was such a well phrased everything. So thank you for sharing your journey with us. I hope to come see you in Berlin as soon as I can start traveling meaningfully again, because I had a great
Please
time there
do.
once.
It's a fantastic city, especially in the summertime.
It's great. The one time I was there, it was in the summer, and it was great. So hopefully Dave's off running his next new startup or working the next great gig. But in the case he isn't, and you're listening to this and you run a Berlin-based tech company, or I guess even a fully remote one, Dave's definitely one of the product, human computer interaction, UX, UI, thoughtful, empathic product people I've ever met. And
Oh,
thank you
thank
again
you.
for taking some time with us.